Hello students, and welcome to this week's workshop, which focuses on quotations and how to make in-text citations. So to start, the definition for quotation marks is one of a pair of punctuation marks, either these are the double quotation marks or single quotation marks, used chiefly to indicate the beginning and the end of a quotation, in which the exact phraseology of a person or of a text is directly cited. So we see this in college level writing when you have narratives, like you have been writing and you use dialogue. So that is indicating that a person is saying these exact words in dialogue and speech. And then also when you are citing text, like the Bain book, anything that is the exact words of the author go into the quotation marks. So there are many rules to quotation marks, like over 10. And so for the purpose of this workshop, I wanted to focus on just a handful of the ones that apply most to the writing that we're doing in this class. So I do at the end give additional resources to those that want to explore further the rules around this punctuation mark. But for this workshop, it's focusing on what we're using in class. So the first rule with quotation marks is to use a capital letter at the beginning of the dialogue or quote. So for example, in dialogue, we see the first sentence, my professor warned, do not forget to read chapter 7 this week. And so notice, even though this started the sentence, this capital, when you're starting dialogue, you also capitalize the first word. Okay, and then an additional example shows quoting from the Bain book. Bain writes, a variety of studies have found a connection between having fun and learning. So again, notice that the start of the quote, the first word is capitalized. Okay, so there is an exception to that rule, and that is if you are quoting only a piece of a complete sentence, then you will not capitalize that first word. So an example of this, Bain relates how curiosity can show up at different stages in our lives. For some, it appears early in life and never goes away. So this is only a partial quote. It's not the whole sentence from the book, and it's actually used as a part of speech in the main sentence. So it is the subject, and then this quote comes in as the verb and the rest of the sentence. So that's another indicator that you won't capitalize the first part of the quote. But okay. Another rule to keep in mind, commas and periods always go inside the quotation marks for dialogue, outside for quotes with in-text citations that end a sentence. So you probably saw that in some of the examples already shown, but let's look again. So first at dialogue, the professor warned, this comma is leading into the dialogue. Do not forget to read chapter 7 this week. And then here the period inside the quotation marks. So period, quotation marks. Another example, life is like a box of chocolates, mused Forrest Gump. Again, notice the comma is inside the quotation marks. And then for quoting a source, the same quote that we looked at before, typically without the citation, the period would go the same as in the dialogue here, period, quotation marks. But because we need to cite the page, because this is a direct quote from the book, then the period actually does not go here. It goes outside the citation. And we're going to look at more examples when we look at in-text citations for that. Don't mind that little blip. Okay, so moving on, another rule is if you use an exclamation point or a question mark inside the quotation marks, then you do not need to add a comma or a period after. So let's look at some examples and also paying attention to the lowercase used after the dialogue or the quote. So the first example, what is the most important component to increase creativity? Question mark, and then the quotation marks, she asked. So notice this stays lowercase, and again, the quotation mark outside, the punctuation inside. So question mark, quotation marks. Second example, I love to learn, exclamation point, quotation mark, the excited student shouted. So here we see, again, lowercase to finish the rest of the sentence. Okay, so those are a handful of the mini rules for using quotation marks, specifically in dialogue and text quotations. So now we're going to look at using MLA style to make in-text citations. So really the main thing you have to remember is if the author is mentioned in the quote or the setup to the quote, then you only have to put the page number in parentheses at the end, and again, the period goes to the outside. So like we saw in that other example. So Bain relates how curiosity can show up at different stages in our lives. For some, it appears only in life and never goes away. So because we have Bain here, we don't need to put the name in the citation. We just need to put the page number. So again, it goes in parentheses and then the period goes on the outside. No punctuation here, only here. If the author is not mentioned and you either just have a quote or in the setup you do not mention where the quote is coming from, then at the end you put the author's last name, no punctuation, there's no comma. Also notice there's no P or page, the word page, nope, just the name, space, and then the page or pages. If it's more than one page, then you have to put all the pages that it's from. That happens a lot when you're paraphrasing, or you might take a couple ideas from different areas and put it into one sentence, and then you would need all the pages involved, and again the period on the outside. So sometimes that curiosity, so essential to intrinsic motivation, deep learning, and adaptive expertise, appears early in life and never goes away. So again, author's last name, space, page number. And those are really the simple rules to in-text citations. If the author is mentioned, just page number in parentheses, period on the outside. And if the author is not mentioned, author's last name, and then page space, page number, parentheses, period. So I'm going to leave you with this website that goes to Purdue OWL, which I'm sure many of you have used before. But if you aren't aware, they do have punctuation help. Okay, so when you follow that link, you will get to Purdue OWL, which is an online writing lab. Again, I'm sure many of you have used this. This is specifically on how to use quotation marks. So they give you the basic rules first, but then over here you can see the extended rules, more rules, specifically with fiction. And then there's even practice if you want to do that. So I will let you explore this if you so desire. And just know too that there's any kind of punctuation that you might want to double check if you're using it correctly, or just do a refresher. You can practice and look through those rules here at Purdue OWL. And then also, this is what I use this site for the most, is the MLA guide, which again, past professors may have shown you this resource before. So just a friendly reminder that any and all questions you have on how to write using MLA style can be answered here. So they even have some example papers that you can look at, but just know that too, when you're writing, if you need any support, this is an amazing site that I use often and highly recommend. So that is the end of our quotations and in-text citations review, and I hope that is useful. And answers any questions that you've had. Okay, happy writing.